Venezuela, once one of Latin America's richest countries, is now in deep crisis. Its vast oil reserves contrast sharply with widespread poverty and desperation. Hyperinflation has rendered the bolivar nearly worthless, and basic necessities are scarce. Millions have fled, creating a refugee crisis that strains neighbors like Colombia and Brazil. The political standoff is severe. Nicolas Maduro clings to power, while much of the world recognizes opposition leader Juan Guaidó. This deadlock has paralyzed the nation and left its future uncertain. The U.S. is watching closely. Venezuela's instability affects the entire region. Mass migration impacts U.S. allies and has implications for American borders. Venezuela's oil reserves also play a major role in global energy markets. There are growing concerns about the regime's ties to U.S. adversaries. For Washington, Venezuela is a top foreign policy concern. The crisis is not just about humanitarian suffering, it's about regional security and global influence. The world is waiting to see what actions the U.S. and its allies will take. The question is no longer whether to pay attention, but how to respond. Venezuela's collapse is a warning of how quickly prosperity can unravel. The stakes are high for both the region and the world. What happens in Venezuela will echo far beyond its borders. The world is watching, and the next moves matter. President Trump has taken a hard line on Venezuela, calling Maduro's government illegitimate and dictatorial. The U.S. has imposed tough sanctions, targeting Venezuela's oil industry and top officials. Trump warns all options are on the table, keeping the threat of force alive. The stakes have never been higher for Venezuela's future. When U.S. leaders say, all options are on the table, history offers clues. The U.S. has intervened in Latin America before, most notably in Panama, 1989, and Haiti, 1994. In Panama, a swift military operation ousted dictator Manuel Noriega, but not without civilian casualties and controversy. In Haiti, the threat of force led to a peaceful transition, restoring democracy without a full-scale invasion. These cases show that military action can achieve quick results, but always carries risks and unpredictable consequences. A Panama-style strike in Venezuela would be high risk, potentially leading to prolonged conflict. A Haiti-style approach, using the threat of force to pressure negotiations, might avoid bloodshed. Both options have serious downsides and no guarantees of long-term stability. The lessons: interventions are complex, outcomes uncertain, and the costs can be high. The U.S. must weigh the risks of action versus inaction. The world remembers the aftermath of past interventions. Any move in Venezuela will be scrutinized globally. The administration faces a difficult choice: pressure, negotiate, or intervene. Each path carries its own dangers. The stakes are not just for Venezuela, but for U.S. credibility in the region. History's lessons loom large over every decision. The world waits to see which path the U.S. will choose. Venezuela's crisis is now a global chess match. Russia and China have become Maduro's key backers, providing loans, weapons, and political support. For them, Venezuela is a strategic foothold in America's backyard. U.S. actions, military posturing, sanctions, and strong rhetoric are signals not just to Caracas but to Moscow and Beijing. The message: the U.S. won't tolerate rival powers propping up hostile regimes in the hemisphere. Russia uses Venezuela to challenge U.S. influence, much like in Syria or Ukraine. For Putin, it's a way to distract and pressure Washington. China's interest is mostly economic, billions in loans tied to oil. Venezuela's collapse threatens China's investments, putting Beijing in a tough spot. U.S. moves risk both Russian and Chinese interests, raising the stakes for all sides. A U.S. intervention would force Russia and China to decide how far they'll go to protect their ally. The risk of a wider confrontation is real. The crisis is no longer just about Venezuela, it's about global power and influence. Every move is watched in Moscow and Beijing. The outcome will shape the balance of power in the region. Venezuela has become a test case for great power rivalry in the 21st century. Venezuela's collapse has fueled a shadow economy of crime and corruption. Drug trafficking, illegal gold mining, and human trafficking now thrive. Corrupt officials and armed groups profit, making them invested in the chaos. Venezuela is a major transit route for Colombian cocaine, with cartels exploiting weak borders and institutions. U.S. officials accuse Maduro's regime of direct involvement in the drug trade, calling it a narco-state. The humanitarian crisis is dire. Millions are vulnerable to exploitation, especially women and children. Human trafficking and forced labor are rampant, preying on desperate refugees. Illegal mining destroys the environment and funds violence, with criminal gangs controlling vast regions. These illicit networks are central to the regime's survival. The human cost is staggering, adding urgency to the need for change. Venezuela's crisis is not just political, it's a humanitarian and criminal emergency. Venezuela's turmoil is felt in the US in real ways. Drug trafficking through Venezuela brings more narcotics to American streets, fueling addiction and crime. The US has indicted Maduro and top officials for narco-terrorism, linking the regime to drug cartels. The refugee crisis is growing. More Venezuelans are seeking asylum in the US, straining border resources. This adds pressure to immigration courts and social services. Instability in Venezuela threatens the stability of key US allies like Colombia and Brazil. A collapsing Venezuela destabilizes the entire region, affecting trade and security. The presence of Russia and China in Venezuela is a direct national security concern. US defense planners worry about foreign military footholds near American borders. The crisis is about more than democracy. It's about protecting US interests at home. Every development in Venezuela has ripple effects in the US. The stakes are both humanitarian and strategic. America cannot afford to ignore what happens next. The US has broadened its strategy beyond Venezuela alone. A major counter-narcotics operation now targets drug flows from South America to the US Navy destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, and surveillance aircraft have increased in the region. This military buildup aims to disrupt the criminal networks funding Maduro's regime. Enhanced patrols make it harder for officials to smuggle drugs, gold, and contraband. It's economic warfare complementing financial sanctions. The US is sending a message. Criminal enterprises are being watched and targeted. The strategy also challenges China's growing influence in Latin America. US officials warn of China's debt trap diplomacy, using loans to gain leverage. In Venezuela, Chinese loans have propped up the regime for years. The US now offers a different model: transparency and rule of law. By targeting illicit networks, the US weakens both Maduro and his foreign backers. The approach is comprehensive: fight crime, counter rivals, and restore stability. The threats are interconnected: criminals, corrupt regimes, and global powers. The US aims to dismantle these networks and reassert leadership in the hemisphere. The fight is about more than one country. It's about the future of the region. The stakes are high, and the response must be multifaceted. The world is watching how the US meets this challenge. Venezuela stands at a crossroads, with the world watching. The US has used sanctions, diplomacy, and military pressure to force change. The preferred outcome is a peaceful, negotiated transition to democracy. But Maduro shows no sign of stepping down. Internal pressure could fracture the regime, leading to a coup or forced exit. The military's loyalty is the key variable. Military intervention remains a last resort, risky, unpredictable, and potentially destabilizing. Any action risks confrontation with Russia and China. Ultimately, Venezuela's fate lies with its people, but global powers will shape the outcome. The stakes are enormous for 30 million Venezuelans, for regional stability, and for the global balance of power. The next chapter will send a message far beyond Venezuela's borders. The world is waiting for a solution that ends the suffering and restores hope. The future of Venezuela is a test for the world order itself.